This is a critique of Black Panther. First, I'll start with what was good, then what I thought was bad and where I thought there was missed potential, and finally, I'll put my own changes in the movie. I think the best way to go through the movie would be scene by scene, but because I'll be adding parts later on, I'll give general thoughts first. The movie had a very unique theme for a Marvel film. What I mean by this is that while many Marvel films ask questions of what to do with great power, it is very interesting to see the perspective from a group who has had power for a long time and chosen not to use it. In many cases, we look at individuals like Peter Parker or Steve Rogers who obtained power and had to learn how and when to use it. I don't need to explain Spider-Man, but Captain America had to grapple with this closely during the events of Civil War. When the Avengers have been using their power, a debate arises on whether or not they should be kept in check. But in Black Panther, T'Challa has to grapple with his inherited power and how Wakanda has decided to keep its ridiculously advanced technology to itself for what seems to be hundreds of years. And it's not just weapons, their medicine, transportation, architecture, and other advances. Stuff that could clearly not only end the world, but help it greatly. This sets a great stage for the main conflict of the story. Not only does T'Challa have to grapple with his decision to enter the world stage as what is basically an unstoppable superpower, but also having to grapple with the decisions of your ancestors and the situation you've been born into. Or rather realizing you're not guilty for their sins, as shown when T'Challa has to ask the Jabari for help and later claims he is not responsible for the Black Panthers of the past. I personally like this theme a lot. I like that the protagonist is not a Marty Stew. He's not overly perfect. They make it clear he's not the best fighter, the smartest, or even the most morally sound in his group. He has a long way to grow to become the king he wants to be, which is great. I like seeing T'Challa grow in this movie as the supporting cast, the villain, and the journey change him for the better. I like the antagonist and how he fought for an argument that can be stood behind, not that his methods really could. This gave him great grounds to oppose T'Challa, who by the end of the movie realizes he must change his approach to being king of Wakanda. Eric forces T'Challa to reevaluate his methods, which is good. A good antagonist should always challenge the protagonist and force them to adapt, which Killmonger did. Or rather, he should have, but I'll address that later. The setting and theme were great, and set themselves apart from the rest of Marvel's super high-tech world by including the African themes. That's all I really liked about this movie. That probably doesn't sound like a lot, because it isn't. There's more to like about this movie, but a lot of it, for me at least, falls into the category of missed potential, rather than being outright good. So I'll include it in this next section. I love the theme, but I thought it could be explored and talked about much, much more. Honestly, the theme was so under-discussed, I'm not surprised that I left the theater not really knowing what T'Challa stood for throughout the entire movie. I think this is due to his opinion being entirely dictated by how much he likes his father at the time. I recommend you watch Wisecrack's video on the subject to flesh it out for yourself. I love the characters, but I felt they had almost no dialogue that fleshed them out. We know T'Challa wants to lead Wakanda like his father did, with the same principles, but that doesn't really tell us anything about his personal opinions on helping the world. He doesn't even really talk about it with Eric. They just have like 2 fights where Eric spouts out some one-liners. Throughout the entire film, I felt like he was one of the flattest characters in the film. All the women have clear motives and act accordingly. Eric is clearly motivated and takes action. T'Challa is a passive hero. He waits for everything to happen around him, other than going after Claw, I guess. But that whole scene doesn't really do anything for the story or to flesh out T'Challa's character. That entire casino scene seems like an excuse to get Martin Freeman into the movie. You could argue this is all for that witty, "the world is watching" line at the end of the scene, but that sounds like BS to me. If they are watching, why is nobody pissed at the end scene for clearly running amok across international borders? Even without that scene, Eric could have killed Claw regardless of all that and gone to Wakanda without that time waster by modifying the scene where he kills him to be before he goes to sell the vibranium instead of after Claw gets caught. But I'm getting off topic. I want T'Challa to talk about his position as a leader and his vision, not just listen to everybody else's vague ideas. He should have a scene where he talks to the council and he gets more insight on why they shun the rest of the world like they do. He should have a scene talking to the people of Wakanda, not just walking through happy crowds of people who clearly don't matter throughout the movie. I can see how the movie is making a point about not being attached to the decisions of your ancestors. They're making it quite literal by having T'Challa's decisions influenced by his dead forefathers. However, this is terrible for the actual plot, because it causes the theme, which is about the violent history of the world outside Wakanda, not whether Eric should have been left behind or not, to be majorly under-discussed. T'Challa never has an inner struggle with a theme. It's replaced with an inner struggle with his father, and the decision to leave Eric behind, which does not connect to the actual theme. So when T'Challa changes his mind, it isn't because he thought about Wakanda and its place in the world. It's because he's upset with his father for leaving Eric behind. The cause is disjointed from the effect, which is awkward at best. Because T'Challa never has an inner or outer dialogue about his opinion on the matter, you never really know what he actually thinks, if he does at all. It's presented as, he thinks this in the beginning of the movie, people tell him he's wrong for the whole movie while he says almost nothing, and at the end of the movie, he changes his mind, which is bad. I want to see him think and struggle with the issue, not just change his mind. I know Nakia wants to help the outside world, but I'm not really sure why. She also doesn't really give any ideas or plans on how they would go about doing it. I feel she should be more influential on T'Challa and push him more towards action. I think she's a great way of challenging T'Challa on why he doesn't want to help the world, or more likely, why he hasn't really thought about it yet. Then comes in Eric. Unlike T'Challa, he's able to capture the attention and favor of the people, in a way T'Challa can't, and boom. He's forced into the conversation with Nakia about why Eric's able to capture the attention of the people and he can't. It's because of the firm moral standing Eric has, and not just T'Challa's "that's just how we do it here" argument. I like Okoye's character and how she's written. She's fun. I don't like that T'Challa's mother is just some useless mother figure who has no say in politics, no real influence over the people, and is basically just used as, I'm just upset when things happen to the main character, Lady Number 4, for the most of the movie. She has almost no lines and says nothing important. She's an underutilized character in my opinion. I think Eric's character and opinions should be more than just tweet length. There's a real case to be made that Wakanda could be helping abused communities around the world, and he addresses none of it in favor of talking about issues that are hundreds of years old. His father has a great line about how black community leaders are assassinated and how they're kept down, and he has about 3 minutes of screen time. I want to see more of that in Eric. Also, why is this entire nation being totally passive about their monarch position being passed around like a hot potato? Why are people following the orders of an outsider? You're telling me a country so proud of its nationalism, it literally shuns out the rest of the world, is okay with an outsider coming in, killing their king, burning their sacred flowers, and waging guerrilla warfare on the rest of the world? They're just going to the market buying bread like nothing's happening? This never really sat right with me. I understand why the blue dudes are following their leader, but not the whole nation. Why are the pilots willing to blow up their own top secret lab? Why are there not riots in the streets? Why is this story basically a Game of Thrones plot that doesn't even address the common folk? Also, why does T'Challa immediately hate his father after learning he killed his uncle, N'Jobu? T'Chaka did it to save Forrest Whitaker's pointless but clearly beloved character. It wasn't out of spite or wanting to keep some dumb shit secret. You could say that T'Challa is mad that he didn't take Eric back to Wakanda, but A, Wakanda doesn't like outsiders, and B, that child has a life in America. It wouldn't be right to rip him away from it. T'Challa's rushed reaction and hate for his father seems childish to me. He was doing what T'Challa would have done up to this point, fighting for the safety of Wakanda. It's fine that he decides to take Wakanda in a different direction, but there's no need for him to denounce not only his father, but all his Black Panther ancestors as well. I don't like that this is the turning point for T'Challa to consider branching out. It greatly undermines Nakia and Eric's efforts to get Wakanda to take action, and they're the ones who actually care about Wakanda's place in the world. This is a big reason I feel Nakia and Eric have so few meaningful dialogues with T'Challa about the theme, which is a waste of a good plot and good characters. Finally, other than a lack of content, I think there are plot holes that make no sense. I'll address those later though. With my thoughts on the movie as it is out of the way, I'm going to make suggestions from here on out. First thing is that I clearly want much more content in this movie than there currently is. Mostly I want more opportunities for meaningful dialogue between T'Challa and side characters to flesh out their opinions on the theme, as well as more backstory for T'Challa and Eric. Here's the movie's scenes as they currently stand. The movie opens up with young Eric playing basketball in Oakland, then moves to Claw and Eric stealing the vibranium hammer. We move to T'Challa getting Nakia and returning home to Wakanda. T'Challa gets his new suit, goes through the ritual of fighting the Jabari clan leader, talks to his father, goes after Claw, Eric frees Claw, Eric kills Claw, Eric comes to Wakanda and demands to fight, flashback to young Eric, Eric kills T'Challa, the girls go to the Jabari and Eric takes the crown / burns the flowers, Eric goes through the Purple Heart ritual and sees his father, T'Challa waking up and talking to the Jabari leader, T'Challa talks to his father again, the final fight scene, and then the after credit scenes. From here on out will be my version of the movie with all my changes and notes put in. I'm going to reference the hero's journey a few times here. It's not necessary to see what I'm going for, but for those who feel the need to learn it, I'll have videos in the description about it. The movie opens up with young Eric playing basketball in Oakland, then moves to Claw and Eric stealing the vibranium hammer. We move to T'Challa getting Nakia and returning home to Wakanda. I'm going to extend the scene where Nakia and T'Challa are talking now. As soon as they arrive back in Wakanda, Nakia and T'Challa are walking around the city and talking. Specifically, they talk about T'Challa's opinion on why Wakanda does not interact with the outside world. However, instead of saying, "it's simply not our way," he goes on a rant about how the outside world is still filled with war and conflict. Their leaders are tyrants and puppets. If they had our technology, they would kill each other, or they would kill us, like they killed his father. Clearly, he's still impacted by the events of Civil War. Also, Wakanda cannot play the judge, jury, and executioner for the rest of the world. They're too powerful for that kind of responsibility. Who could hold them accountable? What's to stop Wakanda from being a tyrant for the rest of the world if a lesser man gets a hold of the throne? Cough cough, Killmonger. And nowadays, what's to stop this ever-advancing world from being dangerous to Wakanda? He tells Nakia about heroes like Iron Man, Ant-Man, Scarlet Witch, Vision, maybe even Thor and the Hulk. They have spies everywhere, so they'd probably know about them too, right? It's better for them to just stay out of world affairs. But then a group of children runs up to them. They're happy to see their king, but ask what happened to his father. I assume everyone knows their king got murdered, right? They'd probably be curious. More citizens, clearly curious about this, gather around. A sea of faces look to T'Challa for answers. He tells them about the meeting, the bombing, the man who did it, and the superheroes who helped them. They're clearly in awe and scared, but he tells them he got the man who did it and that he'll keep them safe. The crowd is clearly happy they have a strong king. Then afterwards, a small child comes up and says to him, "T'Challa, I'm so glad you're our leader. Keep us safe from those bad men." T'Challa clearly realizes that their actions now can deeply impact the future. If he's not careful, the people of Wakanda will want to use their power to keep themselves safe. Side note, I'm not sure if the people of Wakanda don't take in any information from the outside world through like the internet or anything, but they don't seem like they do because we don't really know anything about them. So this scene makes sense to me. Whether they're scared of an unknown world or one they're seeing get more dangerous every day doesn't really matter. It would work either way. We come back to T'Challa getting the new armor from his sister. Go back to the ritual where T'Challa fights the Jabari. Instead of the original Purple Heart ritual, I'm going to change it a little bit. T'Challa sees his father, but on top of discussing how much he misses him, T'Challa asks how to lead Wakanda into the future. These new world powers cannot be ignored. His father ensures him that he's a good man, so leading will be hard, blah blah blah, and that he'll know what to do when the right time comes. That's the last we see of him. He's gone now. No more of this guy. The scene where he goes after Claw is going to be split into two scenes. First, traveling to Korea and talking to Nakia about her work as a spy. She goes into more detail about what she's seen in the outside world and how Wakanda could play a role in it. She mentions the child in the city and that she saw his face. She knows that he knows something must change. They encounter with Claw just like before, but instead there's no underground club. They just jump Martin Freeman and Claw when they make the deal in some random warehouse. I'm doing this to save time and set up for the next change. Claw runs with the vibranium and T'Challa faces off with Eric. This is in place of the car chase scene. Eric says nothing and clearly studies T'Challa's moves in the fight, knowing exactly who he is. T'Challa wins quickly because of the Black Panther suit, but Eric and Claw get away. We can have Martin Freeman get hurt in this scene directly so we can skip the interrogation scene. This is him crossing the threshold into a new territory. A place where you're not just told to keep Wakanda separate from the world. They've gotten involved in world affairs. Eric kills Claw in a much better fight scene. Throughout the movie, he's kind of portrayed as this really good hand-to-hand fighter, but in this scene, he just shoots him, which I felt was kind of a waste of not only Claw's super cool robot arm, but also Eric's really awesome fighting style you see throughout the rest of the movie. Once Claw is dead, Eric drags a body bag to the plane, clearly on his way to Wakanda. T'Challa comes back to Wakanda and actually talks to the council. They're upset that he didn't capture Claw, but T'Challa changes the subject to ask about how long they knew Claw had their technology. This ends up with them talking about their history. Nakia argues with the council and talks about her experiences out in the world. They tell her to shut up, but T'Challa lets her speak. He finds himself conflicted as he continues to question their past in action and is clearly unhappy with their logic, saying, "It's not our way, this is how we keep our people and our technology safe." Then in the middle of all this, Eric is brought into the room and demands to fight for the throne. This time, they do the whole ceremony again, with the people of Wakanda getting to see what happens. This is something important to them. They have a right to see it. No more of this hush-hush bullshit that keeps people out of the know and out of the story. Now, in front of all the people of Wakanda, mid-fight, Eric and T'Challa begin to argue about the outside world. Eric forces it by continually yelling about the outside world and how they hate, quote, our people. Eric tells the people of Wakanda what they did to everybody else. Slavery, poverty, etc. And how they are catching up to Wakanda's power. All those same powerful heroes that helped T'Challa could easily turn on them, and the only way to stop them is to attack first. T'Challa answers talking about how he can protect them, that they don't need to fight. Eric says, "We'll see about that," or something along those lines, and just kills him in the fight. The iconic "This is your king" line clearly splits the people on this. Some people cheer for Eric, and some are in shock as he throws T'Challa off the cliff. This takes us halfway through the hero's journey. T'Challa has reached his lowest point. Now as Eric goes through the Purple Heart ritual, we get an entirely new scene. Like I was saying before, Killmonger doesn't really have any explanation for his motives. I think a great way to give him some clear and concrete motives could go something like this. Instead of his father being left dead in the middle of an apartment, something that is just stupid, you'd think the leader of the most advanced nation in the world would know to at least take the body back with him. I understand Najobu was shamed and all that, but still, leaving him there to be found is just dumb. That and how they left all his books and shit that were related to Wakanda. Now that I think about it, he really has to be the most incompetent leader. Never mind, I'm getting off track again. His father has been taken back to Wakanda by force. They allow him to write a letter to his son, who he's leaving behind. After the ship disappears, Eric rushes to the room. He goes back to an empty apartment and his father has disappeared. There's a note on the bed from his father. The note reads something along the lines of, "You are very special, my son. You're incredibly smart and strong. The people of this community need you. Be sure to help them as you can. Remember where you came from. Goodbye." Red-eyed, he goes back outside. His friends ask what that was. Eric says nothing. Pan up, the sky turns blue, and fast forward to 10 years later. He's playing with the same friends from the basketball scene. Him and one of his friends go off the court to buy some water. His friend mentions he's glad Eric is back from college and that he can't believe he's going to MIT. Eric says, "It's nothing. I'm glad to be back with you guys. I'm going to change this place for the better." At this point, Eric still wants to make the community a better place, but through economic, peaceful means. His friend says, "Yeah, right. Good luck doing that with this shithole." As they walk to the corner store, Eric goes inside while his friend stays outside to talk to two friends, one in a blue shirt and one in a red shirt. As Eric buys the waters, he hears the commotion outside. Rushing outside, he sees his friend's hands up in the air. The kid in the red holding their arm and bleeding. The kid in blue runs off in a sprint. One officer runs after him. The other with his gun still pointed at the kids. The friend he walked over with holds his arm out to the kid running, and the officer shoots his friend. Eric starts to run to him, but the officer points his gun at Eric. He stops, hands up. But in his eyes, you see the decision he's made. He looks at his friend, dead on the ground. It cuts to later that night in Eric's apartment, the same one that his father was taken from. Eric pulls out the old, dusty Wakandan books and reads through them. The camera zooms into Eric's cold, hate-filled eyes, and pans out to the same eyes walking in Wakanda preparing to send out his armed operatives. Boom, there's why he wants to help the community, and why he's going about it in this violent manner, and an explanation for him to remember this whole Wakanda thing. I feel this scene addresses some things that weren't explained in the movie. Why did he go to MIT instead of just going to the military? Because his intelligence is never really used in the movie. This makes him more relatable, so we can empathize with him. And most importantly, why he's so driven and ready to kill for his cause. His dad being killed and telling him fairy tales about Wakanda to 10-year-old Eric is very vague, and I really don't think that would inspire him to do what he does in the movie. Maybe I'm wrong, and the movie is better off without all this, but I like the idea of him having clear reasons for his actions. Back in the current day, the girls go to the Jabari, and Eric takes the crown / burns the flowers. Eric is woken up again with the Purple Heart, but he doesn't see his father again. Instead, T'Challa and Nakia go to the people. They find those who aren't okay with Eric taking over and create a diversion. They create riots, so that Okoye and T'Challa can take on Eric. The Blue Riot Unit guys go to take care of the riots. This allows Okoye to have a one-on-one with Eric. I felt like it was kind of weird that she's flaunted as the best fighter in all of Wakanda, and then when she fights with Eric, it's with at least 4 other people, and they all get their asses whooped. I felt that was kind of unfair to Okoye. I feel like this would be much more exciting and make for a better fight scene. You can have a really great fight scene between Okoye and Eric, with Eric only winning because of the Black Panther suit. That allows T'Challa to come in and still have the same fight scene with him at the end. I feel the need to explain why I went through the trouble of making this video. I started feeling hesitant halfway through. I kind of forgot why I was doing all of this. After all, Black Panther is a good movie. It's about as good as every other Marvel film in most respects. The story is fine, the visuals are great, actors are cast perfectly, awesome soundtrack, all that Marvel stuff. So why am I making this video when I wouldn't make it for any other Marvel film? Honestly, it has nothing to do with the film itself. I was simply caught off guard by how many YouTubers / YouTube channels I like and respect for their thoughts on films are not only giving this movie basically, if not literally, no criticism compared to other Marvel films, but also praising it falsely. The small comments to mention simple shortcomings of other Marvel films are all but absent in their videos on Black Panther. Nobody addresses how T'Challa didn't really struggle with the theme in Black Panther, but people notice everybody in Thor Ragnarok struggles with the theme except for Thor. Every other Marvel villain is just a one-off cardboard cutout bad guy, except this one, who has no explained backstory. I understand his position has an argument to be made for it, but they don't even argue for it. He just is the poster boy for it because his dad was. I don't like going to review videos and seeing reviewers that are usually quite realistic being very soft, or even saying the movie does things well when it just doesn't. People are touting Black Panther as the most visually stimulating Marvel film when recently Thor Ragnarok, Doctor Strange, and Guardians of the Galaxy 2 have come out. People are saying these characters are simply inspiring and some of the best in the MCU, when they have no character development and are cardboard cutouts of vague ideas. Don't get me wrong, I like the characters well enough as it is, but they can't even begin to compete with Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, Bruce Banner, Loki, Peter Quill, all characters who just have more character development in any one of their movies than anybody in Black Panther has. These characters take stances, the plot challenges those stances, and the characters change their opinion in each movie. So hearing people say T'Challa or Eric are some of the best in the MCU is just insulting. But the thing is, these are things I don't even really care about. I expect this when I see a Marvel film. But that doesn't mean I can, or should, just ignore them and act like this movie is flawless. I don't care if people love this movie to the bone. I just don't want to get looked at funny when I say this movie isn't perfect and seem to be the only one who thinks that. The point of this video was to point out that it could have been done better, or at least differently, to address some of its issues. I'm just some guy, so I don't think I made a masterpiece by making this video, but I don't think Black Panther is a masterpiece either. I just wanted to make this video for anybody else who thought the same thing to know that they're not crazy. But I'm probably crazy anyway for putting so much time into this. But whatever. I hope you liked the video. If you have thoughts on the topic, please be sure to share them in the comments. Hopefully I'll be able to get to you down there. See you next time.